Nick, so we're just a few months into this agreement between the federal Liberals and the NDP that's supposed to help the Liberals govern until 2025. Earlier this week, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau got asked a question at a town hall by a student, and I just want you to hear this.
So my question is, will you fulfill the promise you made in your 2015 and 2021 campaigns by replacing the first past the post electoral system with a new kind of proportional representation electoral system? Thank you.
No. I don't believe in proportional representation. I don't think it's a good idea. I did commit to replacing the first past the post system. I love the idea of a ranked ballot where you get to pick your first choice, pick the red guy first and then the orange girl second and the green person third, and then you never get the blue person if that's the way you choose to vote. So you don't have to worry about who might get elected if you vote for your preferred choice. I think having people challenge themselves as a political party to be people's second or third choices actually brings people together.
So Nick, of course, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau wants a ranked ballot, but the NDP does not. The NDP wants proportional representation, and this could be, just one of the many disagreements between these two parties. Do you think we're already seeing cracks in this deal?
Well, potential cracks, and you know what, Michael? The fact of the matter is, the chickens, what do we call it? Policy chickens are coming home to roost, right? Justin Trudeau has been Prime Minister now for 7 years. Now people are starting to go back to what was promised in 2015 when he first fought to become the leader of the Prime Minister, and people are now going back to promises. And the thing is that for most Canadians, the discussion related to democratic reform usually refers to proportional, not necessarily ranked ballot. And this is very important for the New Democrats. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how this parliamentary arrangement between the Liberals and the New Democrats, how it will stand the test of time and the stress. It's easy at the beginning. It's kind of like they're in the honeymoon, right? It's at the beginning. Everybody's happy. There's no elections. The numbers are stable and so forth. But I would expect that there's going to be increasing stress on the relationship, not just because the Liberals will be governing, but odds are they're going to do something that will be unpopular for the NDP caucus, and they're going to have to hold their nose and support the government, or at least prop up the government on any motions of confidence. So watch out for turbulence and strain on the Liberal New Democrat arrangement in Parliament.
And just last month, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was in Kamloops, BC, and he was booed by Indigenous protesters. Just if you're the NDP and you're kind of seeing this, what do you make of it? And how is Trudeau's sort of personal brand doing these days?
Well, his brand is relatively steady, but he's got to be disappointed, or I don't know, annoyed, aggravated, because whether you love or hate Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, they are a government that is trying to do a lot on the reconciliation file. They've spent a lot, made a number of significant financial commitments to Indigenous peoples in Canada, but you can see that in these events that there's a significant palpable frustration among Indigenous peoples in terms of the pace of change, and from their perspective, it just isn't happening fast enough. And I think it has to be difficult, at least, or whatever, for Justin Trudeau to go to an event that hypothetically should be good news, and then to be grilled by young Indigenous leaders on Indigenous issues. So so this is just another example of some of the strain that Trudeau, and also what I'd say the Liberals and the New Democrats, will be under over the next couple of years as they try to keep their parliamentary arrangement alive.
Well, hi, I'm Michael Stittle.
And I'm Nick Nanos.
And you're listening to another episode of CTV's Trendline podcast, the podcast about polling. Nick, I want to just go back to this topic of ranked ballots, because obviously that's how the federal Conservative leadership race is being decided. There was a recent report that perceived frontrunner Pierre Poilievre has signed up hundreds of thousands of new members to potentially vote for him. Could we see a first run win potentially by Poilievre?
If the numbers hold up, yes. And the thing is that Poilievre, for all intents and purposes, is claiming victory, right? By some reports, there are 600,000 members, and Poilievre is claiming to have over 300,000. It doesn't take a lot of math to figure out that at least Poilievre thinks that he's the not only the front runner, but that he could potentially win on the first ballot. But in these ranked ballot scenarios can be quite interesting in results. And here's one of my favorite factoids in the most recent Conservative leadership, which had a ranked ballot. And this factoid has to do with Leslyn Lewis. Leslyn Lewis, has carved out a niche and a following for herself in the Conservative Party of Canada, being very socially conservative. And on the second ballot, after the first ballot was done and they started reallocating votes, Leslyn Lewis actually won or had and garnered more votes than either Aaron O'Toole or Peter MacKay, but it wasn't efficient at converting into points. So how's this? She's going to be a person to watch in terms of potential growth, not necessarily on the first ballot, but if it does go to a second ballot, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with her numbers and whether she has or what type of growth potential that she might have. But we may be in a situation that perhaps Leslyn Lewis could outpace some of the other front runners, such as Jean Charest and Patrick Brown. I don't think she's going to outpace Poilievre because he's got a different kind of thing going, but it's going to be interesting to see whether she performs well. But she performed very well in the last Conservative leadership, just on a vote by vote basis, but just wasn't efficient at converting into points.
This is what I like about ranked ballots. You get some, very interesting results after the first round, and generally some surprises. It seems, I guess, traditional wisdom is that if you're have more of an extreme view, I suppose, and you're not everyone's, I guess, second or third favorite candidate, you have less of a chance of ultimately winning in some cases.
Yeah, and the thing is that it's pretty clear. This has been an absolutely nasty leadership contest, especially between the front runners. Pierre Poilievre, for all intents and purposes, called Jean Charest and implied that it as unethical, which is very kind of, you don't hear that a lot for people within the same party. And the thing is where's I think for Poilievre, it speaks to his strategy. His strategy is not to get second ballot support. His strategy is to win on the first ballot or to come so close that just through attrition, he might be able to win on a second ballot. But it's going to be, his strategy is he's taking no prisoners.
No.
Right. And here's a prediction. This Conservative leadership, regardless of what the outcome is, that if they have 600,000 members on the day of the leadership, my prediction is the day after the leadership, hundreds of thousands of people who bought those memberships will leave. They will leave either because they're upset that Pierre Poilievre won, or they'll be upset because some other candidate, such as Jean Charest or Patrick Brown or Leslyn Lewis, did really well. So there will be mass exodus of the Conservative Party coming out of this, because for the losers, they're going to be really upset and they're just going to go home and they're probably not going to come back.
Nick, this reminds me, you've said this in previous episodes, that there's sort of an opening in the center right of Canada, for the federal Conservatives potentially. And we saw just recently with the Ontario election, a very pragmatic Conservative approach really paid off with Doug Ford's Progressive Conservatives. Alberta is an interesting case. When you compare Doug Ford to outgoing Alberta Premier Jason Kenney, two very different approaches to conservatism, and we saw what happened with Kenney recently with that leadership review.
Yeah, absolutely. Think of it this way, Michael. What we call it, Ford version 1.0, when he first ran. I think for average Ontarians and Canadians, they would have said that he's cut from the same mold as his brother, part of the Ford Nation, very populist, very vocal, very proactive, very good at retail politics. And you know what? People would have, I'll say Jason Kenney 1.0 would have been kind of similar, right? Social conservative, populist, very good on retail politics. We have two of them leading among Canada's most important provinces, Alberta and Ontario. But it's kind of like, Jason Kenney got stuck at version 1.0 and just got crushed, right? During the course of the pandemic, he seemed a little more ideological, seemed a little more rigid and stubborn. And as a result, kind of annoyed and aggravated, not just people outside of the party, but people within his own party. And as a result, that leadership vote where he only had about 51 or 52%, which just must have been a crushing number, knowing that he couldn't stay on. In contrast, Ford went from version 1.0, which was similar to Kenney, to version 2.0, which is, hello, my name is Doug Ford, right? If you don't get vaccinated and you're in my caucus, you're out. And, the Liberals want to subsidize $10 a day daycare. We'll take that. And also what I'll say, a certain level of pragmatism that I think had a significant level of appeal to a number of Ontarian voters, which is why he won his second mandate. So to your point, Kenney and Ford is a study in contrast and what works right now. And, the reality is that if you're a conservative hopeful for the federal leadership, you should probably be learning from both of those examples, especially when it comes to voters in Ontario. And you know what, Michael, and sorry for our listeners and viewers from across the country, Ontario is one of the big prizes. It's not the big prize, but it's one of the big prizes. For the Conservatives, how about this? They can't win an election federally without doing well in Ontario, period, full stop. So the question is, which strategy is more likely to appeal in Ontario? And I'm saying right now, it's Ford version 1.0, 2.0 as the strategy that's most likely to resonate and engage Ontarian voters.
In Alberta, Nick, we might potentially see a former Wildrose leader taking over the United Conservatives. I think, Daniel Smith and Brian Jean are I believe, according to Leger, they might be leading as a potential leader. What do you make of that?
Well, it's, the interesting thing, and this is kind of the bizarre thing about Alberta politics, right? You got the stuff where there was a recording, a Kenney staffer recorded Jason Kenney saying that needs to retain the leadership in order to control. I'm not sure if he used the word crazies, but I think that's what he implied, some of the more extreme elements of his own party. That didn't help him. It's going to be interesting to see where the United Conservative Party goes. Because, right now in the survey by Leger, my friend Jean-Marc Leger, survey that they've done in Alberta, it's basically a statistical tie between the New Democrats and the United Conservative Party in this period following the Jason Kenney resignation. So it's going to be interesting to see where the party decides to go, because it could have a material impact on where the numbers fall in Alberta.
How is the Alberta NDP doing these days under Rachel Notley? Is there a chance that she may return to government?
Yeah, absolutely. With a statistical tie factoring the margin of error in the Leger survey, they're definitely in the race. And the thing is that Alberta generally is like, why even poll in Alberta? That the Conservatives are probably going to win, and they're going to win big. Like Jason Kenney's win, he had a big win in his mandate after he unified the parties and the provincial Conservative parties in Alberta. So the NDP are definitely on the agenda. And my understanding is that they've done a good job at recruiting candidates. And the big question mark is, who will be the next leader of the United Conservative Party? Which direction will they take the party in? And how will they perform in the next provincial election? But right now, I would say statistically it's a coin toss, at least between the United Conservatives and the New Democrats.
Nick, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll look at the 9 lives of British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Nick, so British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, he seems to constantly be battling his own mistakes and also members within his own party, and he just squeaked by a leadership review this week. What do you make of this? How has he managed to survive for so long, and what do you think the future holds for the British Conservatives?
Boris Johnson, the man with the crazy hair, that's who we're talking about. Yeah.
I am a little jealous. I'm a little, follically challenged. So I kind of, I would take his hair if I could.
Well, I won't go down that path, Michael. I think you're fine the way you are. And,
Thank you. Thanks, Nick.
but the thing is what's interesting about Boris Johnson is that he built a new winning coalition for the Conservative Party, because he did better in the Midlands. There are areas like they used to call it the Big Red Wall, where Labour was almost insurmountable in a lot of these constituencies, and Boris Johnson managed to crack that, which was a significant setback for Labour and part of his building of the new coalition. That said, the Conservative Party is still fighting within itself, even on issues like Brexit, on issues related to the defense relationship, for example, between Europe and the United Kingdom. And my understanding is that as part of the Brexit deal, for example, the Europeans had offered to make sure that there were still strong security ties and defense ties between Europe and the exiting United Kingdom. And a lot of Conservative MPs, even though they were okay with a lot of the other Brexit conditions, actually wanted this to happen. They even to have a Brexit, but that they wanted to keep defense and security better aligned with Europe, and this was just not on for the Johnson administration. So he's fighting policy battles. It's kind of like he's fighting at home, and he's also fighting the opposition parties. So it's going to be interesting to see whether this guy can survive. But to your point, he keeps surviving, right? And as a result, he's still prime minister. But we'd like to say, for those of us that follow history, even big players like Margaret Thatcher have been ousted by their caucus. So he should be quite nervous about having over 100 caucus members vote against him in a confidence vote.
It's kind of a strange parallel to outgoing Alberta Premier Jason Kenney as well. I mean, both leaders face criticism over their handling of the COVID pandemic. Johnson was caught in Partygate. There was some situation with Kenney maybe as well. Both had a leadership review and both squeaked by, but only one of them chose to resign.
Yeah, and I think let's face it, for Boris Johnson, it's as everyone knows, he's wanted to be prime minister ever since he was a boy in short pants. And let's not even visualize that at all. But he's wanted to be prime minister for quite a long time, and he's never going to let go of this job. He's going to hold on to it to the very end. But I think part of the problem is that these the Partygate, whatever you want to call it, just shows a certain level. It grinds some people the wrong way because it shows a certain level of hypocrisy, where leaders ask their citizens to do something during the pandemic, and then they do not abide by those rules themselves. And I think that's where the problem is.
Nick, thanks as always for your analysis, and thanks everyone for listening.